She's so senile she won't even notice. My daughter-in-law giggled to my son while going through my jewelry box. I watched them from the doorway. They had no idea I'd been recording everything for weeks. The next morning, my lawyer knocked on their door with documents that made my son go white as a sheet. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. I held my breath, my back pressed against the cool wall of the hallway. The afternoon sun cut a sharp angle across the floorboards, illuminating the dust motes I would normally care to sweep. My phone was a cold, hard rectangle in my palm, the screen dark but alive. The voice memo app was a tiny, pulsing red dot in the center, a silent witness. She's so senile she won't even notice. The giggle was high, brittle, like breaking glass. Chloe. A low, masculine chuckle followed. My son's chuckle. Just be quick. The sapphire earrings are in the velvet case, I think. The sounds came from my bedroom. My bedroom. The room I had shared with Robert for 42 years. I had been in the kitchen, steeping tea, when I heard their car pull up an hour earlier than announced. A courtesy visit, Marcus had said on the phone, to check on me. My instincts, honed by 68 years of living and a lifetime of careful observation, had coiled tight. I had not called out. Instead, I had picked up my phone, opened the app, and walked softly toward the voices. Now I stood frozen, listening to the intimate rustle of my personal things, the familiar scrape of my mother's rosewood jewelry box being opened. I knew the sound of each drawer by heart. "These pearls are pathetic," Chloe said, her voice muffled, likely holding them. "So yellowed. But this diamond pendant, this has weight." "That was Dad's 40th anniversary gift to her," Marcus replied, no sentiment in his tone, only assessment. "It'll reset beautifully. And look at this, her wedding band. She doesn't even wear it anymore. She says it's too loose since she lost weight. Put it with the rest." I felt a hollowing in my chest, a physical excavation. The pain was not sharp. It was deep, cold, and spreading. It was the sound of my only child, a boy I had sung to sleep, discussing the dismantling of my life with the casual air of appraisers. The humiliation was a secondary wave, hot and prickling. They thought me so diminished, so fog-bound that they could rifle through my most private treasures in my own home in broad daylight. I inched backward, one silent step at a time, until I cleared the hallway. Then I turned and walked, my steps measured and quiet, back to the kitchen. I placed the phone on the counter, the red dot still recording. I watched it pulse as I poured the over-steeped tea down the drain. The liquid was dark, bitter, appropriate. The voices grew louder, approaching. I tapped the screen, stopping the recording. I was washing the teacup when they entered. "Mom, there you are!" Marcus's voice was all false cheer. He leaned in to kiss my cheek. I turned my head slightly so his lips grazed air near my ear. Chloe followed, a bright, empty smile on her face. "We let ourselves in. You didn't answer the door. We got worried." Her eyes flicked around my kitchen, never quite landing on me. "I was in the garden," I said, my voice steady. I dried my hands on a towel. "The roses need deadheading. You're early." "Traffic was light," Marcus said, a rehearsed line. He looked at me, and I saw it now, clearly. The condescension in the tilt of his head, the impatient glance he shared with his wife. They were waiting for me to falter, to forget what I was saying. "Would you like some tea?" I asked. "Oh no, we can't stay long," Chloe said, her hand fluttering to her designer handbag. It was new. I recognized the logo. I also recognized the distinct bulky shape of my mother's pearl necklace through the thin leather. She had not even bothered to hide it well. The conversation that followed was a familiar pantomime. They asked after my health with feigned concern. Marcus mentioned again how large and empty the house must be for me. Chloe wondered aloud if I ever got confused with all the stairs. They were laying groundwork, syllable by careful syllable. I had heard variations of this for months. I had dismissed it as stress, as their own busy lives making them clumsy. I had made excuses, a mother's prerogative. But hearing that giggle, she's so senile. That was not clumsiness, that was contempt. They left 20 minutes later, citing a dinner reservation. I stood at the front window watching their expensive car disappear down the tree-lined street. The house settled into a silence that felt different. It was no longer peaceful, it was charged. I went to my small study, the room Robert had used as a den. I sat at my desk, a sturdy oak piece, and opened my laptop. I navigated to a folder I had created weeks ago, labeled Garden Plans. Inside were other files, audio recordings, photographs. I clicked on the oldest audio file dated 2 months prior. Marcus's voice filled the room. "The market is perfect right now, Chloe. This house is in a prime location. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath in this neighborhood? It's a gold mine. She'd be more comfortable in a managed facility anyway. All her needs in one place." I had recorded that from the living room, my phone tucked between the cushions of the armchair. They thought I was napping. Another file, a photo. I had taken it from my upstairs window. It showed Marcus and a real estate agent I didn't recognize, walking the perimeter of my backyard, pointing. The agent was taking notes. Another audio from last week. Chloe, her voice a hushed snake hiss in my own sunroom. "I've already spoken to the bank about a bridge loan, Marcus. Using the expected equity as collateral. They're very understanding." I had been outside just around the corner, watering the hydrangeas. The window was open. Piece by piece, I had collected their betrayal, a suspicious withdrawal from a joint savings account I had foolishly kept with Marcus for emergencies, the sudden pressing interest in my will, my power of attorney documents. I had documented it all, a quiet, persistent archivist of my own impending dismissal. But I had wanted to be wrong. I had clung to the hope that I was imagining things, becoming the paranoid old woman they already thought I was. The recording from today removed all hope. It was the final, undeniable evidence. The theft was not metaphorical, not yet. It was literal. Her hand in my jewelry box, his complicit silence. I saved the new recording, labeling it clearly. Jewelry box, June 14th. I backed up the entire folder to a secure cloud drive Robert had set up for me years ago. Then I sat back in my chair. The initial cold hurt was still there, but something else was crystallizing around it. A clear, solid structure of resolve. They saw a frail, aging woman slipping into the gentle fog of years. They saw a house, a portfolio, a burden. They did not see Eleanor Jefferson. They did not see the woman who worked full-time while raising a son and putting a husband through graduate school. They did not see the librarian who had commanded the respect of rowdy teenagers and discerning professors alike for 30 years. They did not see the widow who had handled her husband's death, the finances, the loneliness, with a grace that had nothing to do with weakness. A plan fully formed and ice-cold settled in my mind. It was not a plan of emotion, it was a plan of action. They had chosen to see me as senile. I would use that as my weapon. I picked up my landline phone, the one with the large buttons. I dialed a number I knew by heart. The line connected after 2 rings. A precise, warm voice answered. Daniels and Associates. "Hello, Janice," I said, my voice even. "This is Eleanor Jefferson. I would like to schedule an appointment with Mr. Daniels. For tomorrow, if he's available. Yes, 10 o'clock would be perfect. Thank you." I hung up. The sun had moved lower, casting long shadows across my desk. I looked at the framed photograph there. Robert, a younger Marcus, laughing on his shoulders, me beside them, smiling. That woman in the photo still existed. She was just done with excuses. I had noticed everything, and now it was time to act. The following morning, I dressed with care. A simple navy dress, pearls, my own from a department store, not my mother's stolen ones, and low-heeled pumps. I placed the manila folder containing my evidence into my leather satchel, the one I had carried to the library for decades. It felt familiar. Correct. This was another form of research, of cataloging facts to reach a definitive conclusion. Mr. Daniels' office was in a quiet, brick-faced building downtown. The air inside was cool, smelling of lemon polish and old paper. Janice, his receptionist of 30 years, smiled warmly. "He's expecting you, Mrs. Jefferson. Go right in." Warren Daniels stood from behind a broad mahogany desk as I entered. He was a tall man, slim and upright, his dark suit impeccable, his white hair a close-cropped cloud. His eyes, behind thin-framed glasses, were sharp and kind. "Nora," he said, coming around to take my hands, "it's good to see you, though I suspect this isn't entirely social." "It is not, Warren," I said, returning the firm pressure of his hands before releasing them. He guided me to a pair of leather client chairs and resumed his seat. "You sounded very certain on the phone. What's troubling you?" I opened my satchel and placed the folder on the desk between us. "My son and his wife are attempting to financially exploit me. They believe I am cognitively impaired. They are planning to sell my home and place me in a facility. They have begun stealing personal items. I require your counsel on how to stop them, definitively and legally." Warren's expression did not change, but a certain light entered his eyes, a focused, professional intensity. He steepled his fingers. "Tell me everything from the beginning." I did. I spoke for 20 minutes. I described the gradual shift in Marcus's demeanor after Robert's death, the increased pressure concerning my assets, the unsolicited visits from financial advisors he knew. I listed the suspicious bank activity. Then I presented the evidence, the printed photographs, the bank statements with certain lines highlighted in yellow. Finally, I produced my phone. "The most recent incident occurred yesterday afternoon," I said. I played the recording. The air in the room seemed to still as Chloe's giggle. Marcus's instructions filled the space. Warren's face remained a professional mask, but I saw a muscle tighten in his jaw. When it finished with my own calm voice scheduling this appointment, he let out a long, slow breath. "I see," he said. He leaned back in his chair. "This is both appalling and remarkably foolish of them. The recording is admissible in our state, as it was made in your own home where you had a reasonable expectation of privacy and you were a party to the conversation, albeit an undisclosed one at that moment. It demonstrates intent." "My primary questions are these," I said, my voice level. "What is my current legal standing? Who has control over my property? And what tools do I have to sever their access completely?" Warren nodded, opening a fresh legal pad. "Your standing is excellent. You are of sound mind, as this meticulous documentation proves. You own your home outright, correct? No reverse mortgage?" "Correct. No mortgage since 1998. "And the duplex on Elm Street, the investment property?" "Also owned outright. Marcus and Chloe currently reside in one unit, rent-free. I had considered it familial assistance." Warren made a note. "A tenancy at will, albeit without a formal agreement. That is important. Now, documents. Do they hold power of attorney for you? Any joint accounts beyond the one you mentioned?" "No power of attorney. There is the one joint savings account, and my will, drafted by you after Robert passed, names Marcus as the sole beneficiary." "We will address each item," he said, his pen moving swiftly. "First, the joint account. We will move your funds to a new individual account today. I will accompany you to the bank. The existing must be revoked and replaced. Immediately, we can execute a new one right here, naming a different beneficiary, a trust perhaps, or a charitable foundation of your choice." A cold clarity settled over me. I want it all redirected. A trust to fund a community garden project in Robert's name. The remainder to the library endowment. Marcus is to receive $1. Explicitly. I want it noted. A faint, approving smile touched Warren's lips. "We can certainly do that. It sends a clear message. Next, the tenancy. You wish to evict them from the Elm Street property?" "I do. What is required?" Given the lack of a lease, you must provide a written notice to quit for termination of a tenancy at will. 30 days is standard. Given the circumstances, we will have it served formally by a process server, along with a cease and desist letter regarding any further interference with your assets or person. We will also include a demand for the return of all personal property removed from your home, specifically listing the jewelry. Their retention of it after this notice could support a criminal complaint. I absorbed each point. That is satisfactory. Nora, Warren said, setting his pen down, this will be a severe rupture. There will be confrontation, anger, attempts at manipulation. Are you prepared? I looked at the folder on his desk, at the phone that held the sound of my son's betrayal. I thought of the hollow feeling in my chest as I stood in that hallway. That feeling was now packed solid with resolve. I am prepared, I said. They have already chosen the rupture. I am merely formalizing it. Their anger is not a deterrent. It is a confirmation of my correctness. Good, he stood. Then let's begin. We'll draft the documents now. I'll contact a reputable process server, and after that, we will visit your bank. The next 2 hours were spent in precise clinical activity. Warren dictated. His computer hummed. The printer produced crisp, authoritative pages. I read each document carefully. The revocation of will, the new last will and testament, the notice to quit, the cease and desist letter. I signed my name, Eleanor Louise Jefferson, with my usual clear handwriting. Each signature felt like the turning of a lock. At the bank, with Warren standing beside me as my counsel, the manager was respectfully efficient. The joint account was dissolved, the funds transferred. The new accounts were established with strict instructions, no other authorized users. The manager's polite demeanor never faltered, but I saw the understanding in his eyes. He had seen similar situations before. Warren drove me home afterward. As we pulled into my driveway, he turned to me. The documents will be served in 2 days. That gives you time. You should consider if you wish to be home or away when they inevitably come here afterward. I will be here, I said, in my living room. I have nothing to hide from. Call me any time if you feel pressured or threatened. He handed me a sealed envelope containing copies of all the documents. You are not alone in this, Nora. Thank you, Warren. I know. I entered my quiet house. It felt different again, no longer charged with painful discovery, but armed with concrete authority. I placed the envelope in my study desk. Then I went to the kitchen and prepared a late lunch. The ordinary actions, slicing bread, spreading mayonnaise, were calming. This was my life, my house, my choices. Later, I sat at my computer. I created a new folder. I labeled it Action. Into it, I moved the digital copies of the newly signed documents scanned and sent by Warren's office. I updated my ledger, noting the closure of the joint account and the new account numbers. The plan was no longer an abstract notion. It was a sequence of events now in motion, as real and irreversible as a signed, legal document. The evidence was no longer just for me. It was the foundation of my counteroffensive. I felt a steady, calm certainty. The grief was still there, a deep, dull ache for the son I thought I had. But it was compartmentalized, placed in a separate box, away from the work that needed to be done. They had underestimated me as a senile old woman. Warren Daniels had not. The law would not. And most importantly, I did not. I closed the laptop. The sun was high outside. There were still roses to Deadhead. Life and the maintenance of it continued. Marcus called 2 days later. The phone rang just as I was finishing my breakfast. I watched it for a moment, the display showing his name, before I answered. Hello, Marcus. Mom, hey, listen. Chloe and I were thinking we haven't had a proper family dinner in ages. How about we come over tonight? I'll pick up some steaks. The offer was unusually generous. I understood its purpose immediately. It was a staging ground. That sounds nice, I said, keeping my voice light, agreeable. But I've already planned a roast chicken, your favorite. Just come at 7. A slight pause. He was thrown by my taking control of the menu. Oh, okay, sure. Chicken's great. See you then. I hung up and finished my tea. The timeline was clear. Warren had informed me the documents would be served tomorrow. This dinner was their final reconnaissance mission, their chance to solidify their narrative of my declining capacity before moving forward. I would give them exactly what they were looking for. I spent the day in ordinary preparation. I went to the market for fresh vegetables. I took the good tablecloth from the linen cabinet, the one with the delicate embroidery, slightly faded. I set the table with my everyday china, not the formal set. The normality was important. My most crucial preparation was the small digital recorder. It was an old model, one Robert had used for lectures. I tested it, ensured it had fresh batteries. I placed it in the wide pocket of my apron, the microphone end pointed outward. I practiced moving with it, sitting, leaning forward. It made no sound. At 7 o'clock precisely, their car pulled in. I watched from the window as Marcus retrieved a bottle of wine from the passenger seat. It was an expensive-looking label. Foreign, out of place. They approached the door, a united front. I greeted them with a soft smile. Come in, come in. Dinner is almost ready. Chloe air-kissed near my cheek, her perfume strong and floral. Something smells amazing, Nora. You shouldn't have gone to so much trouble. Her eyes swept the living room, a quick inventory. Marcus handed me the wine. A Pinot Noir. Should breathe a bit. Thank you, dear. I'll just put it in the kitchen. I took the bottle, its surface cool and slick. I did not own a corkscrew for such a bottle. I left it on the counter. The meal was a study in contrasts. The table held my roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from my garden. Simple, familiar food. They brought the atmosphere of a tense business negotiation. Marcus poured the wine into the water glasses I had set out, as I had no wine glasses. The dark liquid looked foreign in them. For the first half of the meal, the conversation was trivial. Chloe discussed a recent sale at a boutique. Marcus talked about traffic. I nodded, asked small questions, played my part. I passed the butter dish. I refilled their water glasses. The recorder was a quiet weight against my hip. Then, as I was clearing the main plates, Marcus cleared his throat. Mom, we've been thinking, seriously thinking, about you. I paused, a plate in my hand. Oh? Chloe leaned forward, her face a mask of sympathetic concern. It's just, this house, Nora, it's so big, and those stairs to the second floor. We worry. I manage fine, I said, a slight waver entering my voice. I intentionally did not finish the sentence with perfect clarity. Marcus took over, his tone gentle, patronizing. We know you do, but what about a fall? Or forgetting to turn off the stove? We're not always here to check. He exchanged a glance with Chloe. We found a place. Oak Haven. It's a beautiful assisted living facility, really top tier. They have activities, medical staff on site, all your meals prepared. I set the plate down slowly, as if the information required physical adjustment. A facility. But this is my home. It would still be your home, Chloe said quickly, her voice sugary. Just a safer, easier one. No maintenance worries. And think of the social aspect. You'd have friends your own age. And this house, Marcus continued, his eyes alight with a familiar, greedy sheen. The market is incredible right now, Mom. The sale would more than cover Oak Haven and leave a substantial nest egg for your comfort, for future care. I looked down at my hands, folded on the tablecloth. I allowed a silence to stretch, feigning confusion, absorption. Sell the house? It's the logical step, Marcus said, his voice gaining confidence at my apparent hesitation. We'd handle everything, the realtors, the paperwork. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. We just need you to sign a few things to get the ball rolling. A power of attorney would make it all so much smoother, so you don't have to be bothered with the details. There it was. the final objective laid bare over the carcass of the chicken I had cooked for him as a boy. I raised my head, my eyes moving between their expectant faces. I made my expression soft, pliable, a little lost. It's a lot to consider, all at once. Chloe reached across the table and patted my hand. It was a dry, cold touch. Of course it is. Don't decide tonight. Just think about it. Think about the freedom. I will, I said, my voice small. I'll think about it. The rest of the evening was a swift denouement. They helped clear the table with a brisk, efficient cheer that felt like a celebration of their impending victory. Chloe even washed a few dishes, her back straight with purpose. They refused dessert, citing an early morning. Their haste to leave was palpable. At the door, Marcus hugged me, a brief, stiff embrace. "Sleep well, Mom. We'll talk soon." "Good night," I said. I closed the door and turned the lock. I stood in the quiet hallway, listening as their car started and drove away. Then I walked to the kitchen, removed the apron, and took the recorder from the pocket. I pressed stop. I went to my study. I connected the recorder to my computer. I saved the file, labeling it Dinner, Oak Haven Proposal, June 19th. I listened to a segment to ensure the audio was clear. Their voices were unmistakable. Marcus's patronizing pitch, Chloe's faux concern, the explicit mention of power of attorney and selling the house. I attached the file in an email to Warren Daniels with a brief note, further evidence of intent and coercion, as expected. His reply came within minutes. Received, crystal clear. Proceeding as scheduled tomorrow. I shut down the computer. The house was filled with the lingering smells of roasted chicken and their expensive wine. I opened a window in the kitchen, letting in the cool night air. I washed the remaining dishes by hand, the warm water and suds, a concrete, calming action. They had performed their parts perfectly. They had seen exactly what they wanted to see. A confused, pliable old woman, overwhelmed by their reasonable, caring plan. Their smugness had been a tangible thing at my table, a third guest. They had no idea they had just provided me with the final perfect piece of evidence. They had handed me, over my own roast chicken, the legal and moral justification for everything that was coming. The humiliation they had planned for me was now, irrevocably, their own. I felt no triumph, only a cold, solid satisfaction. The trap was no longer just set. They had walked into it, and I had recorded the sound of their footsteps. The morning after the dinner, Warren called. "The service is scheduled for 4 o'clock this afternoon at their apartment," he said. "All documents are ready. I think it's wise for you to be here in the office when it happens. We can review the final strategy, and you'll be away from any potential immediate fallout." "I agree," I said. "I will be there by 3. I dressed with the same care as before, selecting a gray skirt and a pale blue blouse. I looked like a librarian going to a conference, which suited me. I placed a fresh notepad and pen into my satchel. This was not an emotional pilgrimage. It was a tactical briefing. Warren's office felt different today. The quiet held an anticipatory hum. Janice gave me a small, knowing nod as she ushered me in. Warren was not behind his desk. He stood at a large, polished table near the window, several thick folders and a set of documents laid out before him. "Nora," he said, gesturing to a chair, "let's go through the sequence of events one final time." I took my seat, placing my satchel on the floor. The sunlight through the blinds striped the table, illuminating the papers. "Proceed." He tapped the first document. "This is the formal notice to quit. It terminates their tenancy at will at the Elm Street property. It gives them 30 days from today's service to vacate. It is unambiguous." He slid a copy toward me. The language was blunt, legal. It listed the address, their names, and the effective date. "And if they refuse?" I asked. "Then we file for a formal eviction with the court. The process server today is also a sheriff's deputy, which adds official weight. Refusal would be foolish, but we are prepared." He moved to the next document. "Cease and desist. This orders them to stop all contact with your financial institutions, to make no further attempts to influence your living situation, and to return all personal property removed from your home, specifically enumerating the jewelry items from your recording. Failure to comply opens them to civil action and supports a report to the police for theft. I read the listed items: my mother's pearl necklace, my diamond pendant, my wedding band. Seeing them in cold legal type was a peculiar sensation. It validated the violation and codified the remedy. Next, the revocation. He presented a single heavy stock page. This document revokes any and all prior wills and codicils. It nullifies the existing will that names Marcus as your beneficiary. It must be executed with the same formalities as a will itself. We will do that today. And the new will? I asked. He opened a thicker folder. Here is the final draft. As you instructed, it establishes the Robert Jefferson Memorial Community Garden Trust as the primary beneficiary of your estate, with a secondary bequest to the Public Library Endowment. It names me as executor, with a successor from my firm. Your son, Marcus Alonzo Jefferson, is left the sum of $1. The language is explicit. This bequest is made intentionally and not as an oversight. He looked at me. It is a severe statement. Are you certain? I am certain, I said. The words felt factual, not emotional. It is not a statement of passion. It is a statement of consequence. He has already chosen his path. This document reflects that choice. Warren gave a single slow nod. Understood. Finally, while they do not hold power of attorney, we are creating a durable power of attorney document naming me as your agent, should you ever require one in the future. This preempts any future attempts by them to petition the court for guardianship. It seals the legal perimeter. He laid out the final document. It was a comprehensive defense, a fortress of paper and law. I felt a profound respect for the process. This was not magic. It was procedure, attention to detail, the systematic application of rules. It was a language Marcus and Chloe did not speak because they had never imagined I would learn it. The process server will deliver the notice to quit and the cease and desist at 4 p.m. MC, Warren continued. He will obtain a signed proof of service. I will email you a scanned copy the moment I receive it. I advise you not to answer your phone this evening. Let them absorb the shock. Any communication should go through me initially. That is my preference as well, I said. Then there is only the execution of the new documents. He pressed a button on his intercom. Janice, could you and Paul come in, please? A moment later, Janice entered with a younger man I recognized as Warren's associate, Paul. They would serve as the two disinterested witnesses required for the will and the power of attorney. Warren handed me a pen. We will do the revocation first, then the new will, then the power of attorney. Read each one aloud as you sign, as is customary. I took the pen. It was a solid, weighty fountain pen. I read the revocation document clearly, my voice steady in the quiet room. I, Eleanor Louise Jefferson, hereby revoke all former wills and codicils made by me. I signed my name with a firm, clear hand. Janice and Paul signed beside their printed names, then Warren notarized it. We repeated the process for the new will. The document was long, but I read the key provisions: the establishment of the trust, the library bequest, the $1 bequest to Marcus. Saying the words aloud, I give, devise, and bequeath to my son, Marcus Alonzo Jefferson, the sum of $1, felt like speaking a historical fact. Janice's face remained professionally neutral, but I saw Paul's eyebrows lift slightly. They both signed. Finally, I executed the durable power of attorney, naming Warren. With that, the legal transfer was complete. My assets, my future, my agency were secured behind a wall of impeccable documentation. Warren gathered the originals. I will place these in the firm's vault. You will receive copies before you leave. He walked to a printer in the corner and initiated the copying. The machine hummed, a low, purposeful sound, and began producing sheets. The rhythmic noise filled the room. It was the sound of the plan becoming physically real, page by page. While we waited, Warren handed me a business card. "This is the process server, Deputy Miller. If they attempt to contact you in an aggressive manner, you may refer to him. He is aware of the situation." I took the card and placed it in my notepad. The printer finished. Warren collated the copies and slid them into a heavy envelope, which he handed to me. "It is done," he said. "The mechanism is in motion. The next move is theirs, but their options are now severely limited." I stood, taking the envelope. It had a satisfying heft. "Thank you, Warren, for your skill and for your respect." He came around the table and shook my hand. "It has been a privilege, Nora. Now go home. Tend your garden. Let the law do its work." I left the office, the envelope in my satchel. The sun was still high. I drove home, the familiar streets passing without incident. There was no sudden thunderclap, no dramatic shift in the weather. It was simply a Thursday afternoon, but in an apartment across town, a clock was now ticking, and for the first time, my son and his wife were not the ones who had said it. I had the documents, still warm from the printer, to prove it. I arrived home from Warren's office and placed the envelope containing my new will on the desk. I looked at the clock. It was 4:20. The documents would have been served by now. The knowledge was a quiet, factual presence in the room, like a piece of furniture that had always been there. I felt no urge to call or check. The mechanism was in motion. My role was to wait. I changed out of my skirt and blouse into an old pair of denim trousers and a faded cotton shirt. I put on my wide-brimmed gardening hat and my leather gloves. The afternoon sun was warm, but not oppressive. My garden required attention. The rose bushes along the south fence were my husband's pride. Robert had planted them the year we bought this house, a mix of hybrid teas and floribundas. He had taught me how to care for them, the precise angle for the pruning cut, the importance of deadheading, the fight against black spot. I had taken over their care entirely after he died. It was a duty and a comfort. I knelt on the foam pad I kept by the tool shed and began. The work was methodical. Identify the spent bloom, trace the stem down to the first set of 5 leaves, make a clean cut. The soft snip of the shears was a rhythmic sound. The fallen petals collected in my basket, their colors still vibrant, even in fading. As I worked, my mind drifted, not to the impending confrontation, but to the past, to Robert kneeling beside me, his large, gentle hands demonstrating a cut, to a small boy, Marcus, chasing a butterfly between these very bushes, his laughter high and clear. He had loved helping his father water, always begging to hold the hose. The memory was sharp, a distinct image from a different world. The grief arrived then, not as a storm, but as a slow, deep tide. It was not only for Robert, though that ache was a constant companion. It was for the son I had raised in this house, fed at this table, taught to read in that living room. The boy who had become the man who now saw me as a ledger entry. I allowed the feeling to wash over me. I did not fight it. I knelt in the soil and let the sadness exist. The shears continued their work. Snip, snip, snip. This was the true center of it all. Not the anger, which was a useful fuel, but this deep parental sorrow. It was the core of my resolve. To excuse his behavior would be to dishonor the man who had helped raise him and to disrespect the woman I had been. I had loved that boy unconditionally. The man required a different set of rules. I moved to the next bush, a prolific yellow floribunda. The work was physical, absorbing. The scent of damp earth and crushed greenery filled my senses. My back began to protest, a familiar stiffness. I welcomed it. It was a feeling of effort, of maintenance, of life continuing. By the time I had finished the last rows, the basket was full of cuttings. My gloves were stained green. I stood slowly, feeling the creak in my knees. I looked over the garden. Each bush looked cleaner, ready to direct its energy into new growth. The work was not creative, it was editorial. It removed what was spent to make way for what could still be. I carried the basket to the compost bin, emptying it. I cleaned my shears with an oily rag and returned them to the shed. The practical tasks grounded me. Back inside, I washed my hands at the kitchen sink, the cool water rinsing away the dirt. I made a pot of tea and sat at the table. The house was silent, but it was my silence now. I owned it completely. My phone, lying on the counter, began to vibrate. The screen lit up with Marcus's name. I watched it buzz and spin on the granite surface. It rang for the full duration, then went silent. A minute later, it began again. Chloe's name this time. I did not move. After that call went to voicemail, the phone was still. They were likely too shocked to form a coherent strategy yet. Warren's advice had been correct. The quiet was a space I needed to inhabit. I finished my tea. Then I went upstairs, past my own bedroom, to the guest room at the end of the hall. It had been Marcus's childhood room for a time, then a generic space for occasional visitors. It held a double bed, a dresser, a reading chair by the window. It was clean but impersonal, frozen in the past. I opened the closet. It contained extra blankets and a set of old suitcases. I began to remove these items, carrying them to the hallway. I stripped the bed of its floral comforter and pillow shams, leaving only the plain white mattress cover. I opened the windows to let in fresh air. I was not preparing this room for a guest. I was preparing it for a different purpose. With the duplex soon to be vacant, I would need to manage its sale or new rental. That would require organization, perhaps a small home office. This room, with its good light and quiet, would serve. It was a practical decision, a reclamation of space. It was also a symbolic one. I was clearing out the dormant, unused areas of my home and my life, making them functional for my future. As I dusted the dresser top, I found a small framed photograph that had been tucked behind a lamp. It was a picture of Robert and a 10-year-old Marcus holding up a large fish they had caught on a summer trip. Both were grinning, sunburned, utterly happy. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I picked it up. I did not put it in a box to be stored away in grief. I carried it downstairs to my study. I placed it on a bookshelf beside a picture of Robert and me on our anniversary. It belonged to my history, not to a ghost room. The evening deepened. I ate a simple supper. I did not turn on the television. The quiet was not empty. It was full of the day's work, both in the garden and in my mind. The grief had been acknowledged. The resolve had been tempered by physical labor. The legal wheels were turning. I was in the calm eye of the storm I had set in motion. And I was, for the first time in many months, completely at peace within it. The next move was theirs, but the ground on which they would stand was now entirely of my making. I had tended my garden. I had cleared a room. I was ready. The silence held until just past 8 o'clock. I was in the living room reviewing a seed catalog for the next planting season when my phone rang. It was Warren. "Nora, it's done. The documents were served at 4:15. Deputy Miller reported direct service to both parties. Marcus accepted the papers. Chloe became verbally agitated. The deputy remained professional and left once service was confirmed. I have the signed proof of service in front of me. "Thank you for the update," I said. "The 30-day clock is now ticking. I expect you will hear from them shortly. Remember, you are under no obligation to engage. Refer them to me." "I understand." I had just set the phone down when it began to ring again. This time, it was a video call from Marcus. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but a certain clinical curiosity took hold. I wanted to see his face. I accepted the call, but I did not activate my own video. His image filled my screen. The setting was their living room, all sharp angles and cold, modern furniture. Marcus's face was flushed, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning fury. He was holding up the sheaf of papers. "Mom, what is this?" His voice was tight, straining for control. "It appears to be legal documents, Marcus," I said, my tone neutral. "Don't play dumb with me." The control snapped. "A notice to quit? An eviction from the duplex? What insane game are you playing?" Behind him, Chloe moved into the frame. Her face was contorted, her expensive blonde hair disheveled. "And a cease and desist. This is harassment. Who put you up to this? Was it that old lawyer? Daniels?" I did not answer her. I kept my focus on my son. "The notice is straightforward. You have 30 days to vacate the property on Elm Street. The rent-free tenancy is terminated." "You can't do this," Chloe shrieked, leaning into the camera. "We live here. Our things are here. This is our home." "It is my investment property," I corrected, my voice even. "You have been guests. The guest period has ended." Marcus shoved the papers toward the screen, as if I could read them through the video. "And this demand to return jewelry?" "What jewelry? This is slanderous. Mom, you're clearly confused. You're not thinking straight. We need to talk about this. Now." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "The documents state the requirements. You should read them carefully." His expression shifted, the anger morphing into a desperate, wheedling familiarity. "Mom, please, just think. If this is about the dinner, about Oak Haven, we were just worried about you. We were presenting options. This is a drastic overreaction. You're not well. Let us come over. We can sort this out, get you the help you need." The patronizing tone was back, but it was frayed now, edged with panic. He was trying to revert to the previous script, where I was a confused old woman and he was the concerned son managing my affairs. He did not yet understand that the script had been shredded. "I have all the help I require," I said. "My lawyer's contact information is on the documents. Any further communication regarding these matters should be directed to him." "Your lawyer?" Marcus spat the word. "Since when do you need a lawyer to talk to your own family? What did he tell you? What lies did he fill your head with?" "Goodbye, Marcus. The 30 days began today. I suggest you use the time to find new accommodations." "Mom, wait!" I ended the call. The screen went black, reflecting my own calm expression back at me. I placed the phone on the side table. It began to ring again instantly, a frantic, buzzing vibration. I ignored it. I could picture the scene in that sterile apartment with perfect clarity. The papers scattered on their glass coffee table, Marcus pacing, running his hands through his hair, trying to reconcile the meek mother he imagined with the legal reality he was holding. Chloe, probably crying real tears of rage and fear, the social facade cracking under the pressure of a practical problem she could not shop her way out of. Their shock was the point. They had believed themselves the only actors moving a passive object, me, around the board of their design. They had not considered that the object could pick up the board and change the game. My phone buzzed again, this time with a string of text messages. I glanced at the screen. "Mom, this is crazy. Call me." "We are family. You can't do this. You are going to regret this. That lawyer is exploiting you." "Where are you going to live when we sell the house?" "Think." The last one almost made me smile. The threat was hollow, and its inclusion revealed his desperation. He still believed the house was his to sell. He had not yet grasped the full scope of the new will, the revoked old one. That realization was still to come. I did not reply. I blocked the number for the rest of the evening. I followed Warren's protocol. I made a cup of chamomile tea and took it to my study. I opened my email. There was a message from Warren with the scanned proof of service attached. I opened it. The form was official, with a county seal. It listed the date, time, address, and the deputy's signature confirming delivery to Marcus Alonzo Jefferson and Chloe Marie Jefferson. It was a piece of bureaucratic poetry. I saved it to the action folder. The folder was growing. It contained the initiation of my countermove, the first tangible result. The calm I had cultivated in the garden remained. Their panic, their anger, their insults, They were external phenomena now, like bad weather on a radar screen. I was insulated. The law was my shelter, and my own resolve was the foundation. They had felt the first tremor of the world they had taken for granted collapsing. The eviction was not just about a place to live. It was the first concrete proof that their assumptions were wrong, that I was not a resource to be managed, but a person who could act. And I had acted. The phone was silent now, blocked. The quiet in my house was deep and complete. I finished my tea. I looked at the family photo on the bookshelf, the one of Robert and a young Marcus with their fish. The boy in that picture was gone. The man who had replaced him was now facing the consequences of his own choices. I felt no pleasure in it, only a cold, clear certainty that I had done what was necessary. The knock on their door had echoed. Now I waited for the reverberations to shape what came next. The blocked silence lasted for 3 days. I used the time to complete the reorganization of the guest room, setting up a small desk and filing cabinet. I ordered supplies for the Community Garden Trust, researching soil amendments and perennial varieties. The work was purposeful and quiet. On the 4th morning, I unblocked Marcus's number. I was not seeking contact, but I was not afraid of it either. The inevitable call came just after 10 a.m. as I was reviewing the garden plans at my new desk. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello, son." The sound on the other end was pure, unfiltered rage, stripped of its earlier pretenses. "What have you done?" His voice was a ragged shout. "I went to the bank. They said the joint account is closed. They wouldn't tell me anything else. They said to contact the account holder or her legal representative. What did you do with the money?" I leaned back in my chair, the receiver cool against my ear. I moved my funds to a more secure location. "Your funds? That was our emergency fund. We had an agreement." "We had no such agreement," I said, my voice level. "It was my savings account. You were listed as a joint owner for convenience. The convenience has ended." A harsh, disbelieving laugh crackled down the line. "Convenience? You're destroying your family over convenience? Do you have any idea what you're doing? We have bills, commitments, the mortgage on this place." "You have no mortgage on the Elm Street property," I interrupted calmly. "I own it outright. Your financial commitments are not my concern. You have 27 days to arrange new housing." The line was silent for a moment, filled only with his ragged breathing. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted to something colder, more threatening. "This has gone far enough, Mother. I'm coming over. We're going to sit down, and you're going to explain what that lawyer has tricked you into signing, and then we're going to fix it." "You are not welcome here," I said, "and Mr. Daniels has tricked me into nothing. He has executed my instructions." "Precisely." "Your instructions?" he sneered. "Your instructions are the ramblings of a confused old woman. You don't understand the documents you signed. He's isolating you from your family so he can control your estate. It's classic elder abuse." I let the accusation hang in the air for a beat. Then I said, "Is that what you believe?" "It's the truth." "Interesting." I reached for my laptop, which was open on the desk. I navigated to the folder containing the audio files, because I have a different understanding of the truth. Would you like to hear it? "What are you talking about?" I located the file labeled Jewelry Box, June 14th. I turned up the volume on the computer speakers. Then I pressed play and held the phone receiver toward them. The recording was crisp. Chloe's giggle pierced the static of the line. "She's so senile, she won't even notice." Then Marcus's voice, clear and familiar. "Just be quick. The sapphire earrings are in the velvet case, I think." I stopped the playback and brought the phone back to my ear. The silence from his end was absolute, a void. "That was recorded in my hallway," I said. "The afternoon you came to visit, the day you stole from me." That's, he stammered, his voice suddenly small. "It is admissible evidence," I continued, as if discussing a minor point of order. But there's more. Would you care to hear the discussion about selling my house or the plan for the assisted living facility? I have those recordings as well. The audio quality from the dinner conversation is particularly clear. Your concern for my welfare was very articulate. You recorded us. The words were a choked whisper. I documented my interactions, I corrected. Given the concerning shift in your behavior, it seemed prudent. A confused old woman, as you pointed out, might not think of such a thing. The power dynamic in the conversation had not just shifted, it had inverted. I could feel his understanding dawning, a slow, terrible awakening. He was no longer speaking to a malleable target. He was speaking to the architect of his predicament. You set us up, he breathed, horror seeping into his tone. I protected myself, I said. You and Chloe provided the script. I merely recorded your performance. Those recordings are now with my lawyer, along with the bank statements, the photographs, and the new legal documents. What new documents? He asked, dread flattening his voice. The revocation of the old will, the new will, the durable power of attorney, all executed and notarized. I paused, letting the information settle. You should receive a formal copy of the new will from Mr. Daniels's office in due course. It details the final disposition of my estate. You cut me out. It wasn't a question. It was a stunned realization. The document reflects the current state of our relationship, I said. It is a legal and factual correction. The rage returned then, but it was weaker, fractured by shock. You can't do this. I'm your son, your only child. After everything, after Dad. Do not speak of your father, I said, and for the first time a sliver of ice entered my voice. He would not recognize the man you are now. He raised you to be better than this. That struck a silence deeper than the others. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then nothing. The cease and desist letter demands the return of my jewelry, I continued, reverting to the practical. You will deliver it to Mr. Daniels' office by the end of the week. Failure to do so will result in a police report for theft. The evidence, as you now know, is conclusive. Mom, the word was a plea, stripped bare. The conversation is over, Marcus. You have 27 days to vacate the property. Communicate through Mr. Daniels. I ended the call. I placed the phone gently on the desk. My hand was steady. The quiet of the room rushed back in, but it was a different quiet than before. It was the quiet after a necessary surgery, painful but clean. I had not yelled. I had not cursed. I had simply played back his own words, stated the facts, and outlined the consequences. The simplicity of it was its own form of devastating power. He had been defeated not by a dramatic outburst, but by a series of recorded conversations and signed papers. His own contempt, preserved in digital audio, had been the instrument of his downfall. I looked at the family photo on the bookshelf. The boy with the fish was gone. The man on the phone was a stranger, and I, Eleanor Jefferson, was finally done negotiating with that stranger. The line was drawn, the boundary was enforced. I felt a vast, empty space where the conflict had been, and within it, the first genuine sense of peace I had known in a very long time. The silence after our call was not empty. It was a waiting space. I did not wonder what Marcus was doing. I knew. The shock would be wearing off, replaced by the frantic scramble of a man who has seen the ground disappear beneath his feet. I continued my routines. The garden, the correspondence for the trust, the quiet order of my home. I was an observer now, watching the consequences of my actions unfold at a safe distance. 2 days after the call, a courier delivered a small, padded envelope to my door. It required a signature. I signed for it, took it inside, and placed it on my desk. I did not open it immediately. I finished watering the African violets on the sun porch first. Then I sat down, slit the envelope with a letter opener, and tipped its contents onto my blotter. My mother's pearl necklace slithered out, the clasp catching the light. My diamond pendant followed, then my wedding band. They lay there, inert, a returned inventory. There was no note. The act of returning them was the message. It was surrender on that front, an acknowledgement of the evidence I held. I did not touch them. I looked at my wedding band, the metal worn thin in one spot from decades against Robert's ring. They had taken it as a commodity. Seeing it again, I felt no sentimental rush, only a confirmation of its return to the correct ledger. I placed each piece back into the envelope. I would have them professionally cleaned later. For now, they were evidence received, a point on a checklist. The phone rang later that evening. It was Marcus again. His voice was different, raw, exhausted, stripped of the performative anger. "The jewelry," he said. "You got it." I did. A long pause. Chloe left. She's at her sister's. I said nothing. I had not asked. "She blames me," he continued, the words spilling out in a monotone. "She says I mishandled everything, that I should have known, that I should have controlled the situation better." A bitter, hollow sound escaped him. "She called you a vicious old witch. She said she's not coming back unless I fix this, unless I get the apartment and the money back." I listened. This was the unraveling. The alliance based on greed could not withstand the pressure of consequence. "I can't fix it," he said, and it was almost a whisper. "The lawyer, Daniels, he won't take my calls." The bank manager looked at me like I was a stranger. The realtor I was working with heard about the eviction notice and dropped us. It's all gone. Still, I remained silent. My role was not to absolve or advise. It was to witness the natural outcome of chosen actions. "Why did you record us?" The question was plaintive, childlike. "How could you do that to your own family?" That warranted a response. "You were stealing from me in my own home," I said, my voice flat. "You were planning to sell my house and institutionalize me. You called me senile. Recording you was a defensive measure, a sensible one. We were worried about you." The protest was automatic, but it had no force left. "You were worried about your inheritance," I corrected, "and your lifestyle. The recordings prove that. You should listen to them. You might hear yourself clearly for the first time." He made a strangled sound. "I have nowhere to go, Mom. The 30 days. We can't find a place that fast. Not without the money from the accounts. Not with everything. Those are practical problems," I said. "You will need to solve them." "You'd let your son be homeless?" The guilt attempt was a last feeble weapon. "You are a grown man in his 40s, I said. "You have a job. You made choices with the expectation of a specific outcome. That outcome has changed. You must adjust. That is adulthood." The line was quiet for so long I thought he had hung up. Then he spoke, his voice barely audible. "You really hate me, don't you?" I considered the question. The word hate was too active, too passionate. What I felt was more profound in its finality. "I do not hate you, Marcus. I have simply withdrawn from the relationship. You broke its terms. There is nothing left to manage." The finality of that statement seemed to sink in. There was no yelling, no dramatic pronouncement, just a cold, factual severance. "I have to go," he mumbled. "Goodbye." I set the phone down. The report was complete. The fracture between them had occurred, just as the pressure of reality had dictated it would. Chloe, the instigator, had fled the sinking ship, blaming the captain. Marcus was left adrift, finally confronting the ruin of his own making without her voice in his ear to redirect the blame. I felt no satisfaction in their misery. I felt a detached, clinical acknowledgement. This was the predicted result. The seeds they had planted, disrespect, greed, condescension, had now grown into this thorny, choking harvest. They were entangled in it. I stood and walked to the window. The night was clear. My own reflection looked back at me, a woman in a well-ordered room, surrounded by her own chosen peace. The chaos across town was not mine. It was the echo of a door I had closed. The mechanism I had set in motion was working with the clean, impersonal efficiency of a legal process. Their world was collapsing in on itself, and all I had to do was continue living in mine. The justice was not theatrical, it was administrative. And it was, I thought, as I turned off the desk lamp, entirely sufficient. The key was returned by certified mail on the 29th day. A single brass key in a blank envelope. The proof of delivery slip signed by Marcus. No note. That was the final communication. The 30-day period expired at midnight. The next morning, I called a locksmith and had the locks on both units of the duplex changed. It was a practical necessity, not a symbolic one. Then I called Warren. "The property is vacant and secure," I told him. "Excellent. I've already been in touch with a reputable real estate agent who handles investment properties. She can meet you there this afternoon to walk through and give you an appraisal. The market is still strong. I would like to see it first. Alone. Of course. Take your time." I drove to Elm Street in the mid-morning. The duplex was a modest, well-maintained brick building from the 1950s. Robert and I had bought it as a long-term investment, a source of supplemental income for our retirement. It had never felt like a home to me, only an asset on a balance sheet. Now it was a vacant asset. I used my new key to enter the unit Marcus and Chloe had occupied. The air inside was still and stale, carrying a faint, sour smell of neglect and hurried departure. The rooms were empty. They had taken all the furniture, the decorations, every trace of themselves. All that remained was debris, a broken lamp in a corner, a tangle of coaxial cable, dust balls in the closets. The polished, cold modernity they had cultivated was gone, leaving only the bare, scarred floors and walls. Sunlight streamed through the uncurtained windows, illuminating the emptiness. I walked from room to room. The kitchen, where Chloe had no doubt complained about the outdated appliances. The living room, where they had plotted their future with my money. The bedroom. I felt nothing here. No anger, no sorrow. It was simply a space that had been occupied and was now vacant. The silence was total. I stood in the center of the living room, the sunlight warm on my face and hands. This was not a victory pose. It was an assessment. The problem, their tendency, their sense of entitlement, had been removed. The space was now neutral, waiting for a new purpose. My purpose was clear. I would not be a landlord again. I did not need the income, and I did not want the responsibility or the connection to this place. I would sell it. The proceeds would be substantial. They would fund the Robert Jefferson Memorial Community Garden Trust completely, with a healthy remainder for the library endowment. The garden, a living, growing thing, would be Robert's legacy, not this empty brick shell. A sense of profound peace settled over me, solid and quiet. It was the peace of a correct decision, cleanly executed. I locked the door behind me. That afternoon, I met with the real estate agent, a sharp, efficient woman named Linda. We walked through both units. She noted the good condition, the desirable street. She gave me a confident estimate of the property's value. It was a significant number. I told her to proceed with the listing. "Will you want to review offers as they come in?" she asked. "I will trust your judgment within the price range we've discussed," I said. "I want a swift, uncomplicated sale." The next piece of business was the other unit. It had been rented for years to a quiet, retired teacher who had moved to be nearer her daughter. It, too, was now vacant. I had a decision to make. I placed an advertisement in the local community newsletter and online. I was specific: responsible tenants, long-term preference, no pets. I conducted the viewings myself. The third applicant was a young family, the Millers. He was a high school science teacher. She worked part-time at the library. They had a 4-year-old daughter with bright, curious eyes. They spoke of wanting a stable home, a yard for their child. They were respectful, their references impeccable. I offered them the lease. They accepted with grateful smiles. I did not tell them the history of the other unit. That was the past. They represented a new, positive chapter for the property, a use that felt correct. Their first month's rent and security deposit would be the last income the property generated for me before its sale. A week later, I met with Warren and the city planner in charge of community development. We sat in a small conference room at City Hall. I presented the formal proposal for the Robert Jefferson Memorial Community Garden to be funded by the trust established in my will, but with an immediate seed grant from the proceeds of the duplex sale. The planner, a man named David, was enthusiastic. He showed me maps of a vacant lot near the community center, perfect for the project. "We can have the soil tested next week," David said. "The community interest is already high. We could break ground in the fall." Warren slid the funding commitment letter across the table. I signed it. The money was no longer just a figure in a bank account. It was a transaction, a conversion of cold asset into living, communal growth. Robert would have liked that. He had always been better with living things than with financial statements. Driving home, I felt a lightness. The burdens I had carried, the betrayal, the legal battle, the management of the property were gone. They had been processed, dealt with, concluded. In their place were active, positive projects, a garden to nurture, a young family housed, my own home fully and peacefully my own. I stopped at the market and bought a small lemon cake from the bakery. When I got home, I made a pot of strong coffee, cut a slice of the cake, and took it to the sun porch. I ate slowly, watching the birds at the feeder. The taste was sweet, tart, simple. The reclamation was not about getting back what was stolen. It was about choosing what to do with what remained. I had chosen to build something new, to foster life rather than manage decay. The empty apartment was just a room. The garden would be a legacy. The choice, finally, had been entirely mine, and that was the heart of the victory. The book club was set to meet at my house that Thursday evening. I spent the afternoon preparing. I made a pitcher of iced tea, sliced a pound cake I had baked the day before, and arranged chairs on the porch. The evening was warm, the air soft with the approach of autumn. I turned on the citronella candles to ward off mosquitoes. The familiar routine was a pleasure. The women began to arrive just after 7. Sarah, from my old library, her arms always full of books. Grace, who lived 2 streets over and shared my interest in roses. Miriam, sharp-tongued and witty, who had been Robert's colleague years ago. We were 5 in total, a small, steady group that had met monthly for over a decade. We settled into the wicker chairs, plates balanced on laps. Our book this month had been a historical novel, and the discussion began easily, flowing from plot to character to the author's research. The talk was lively, punctuated by laughter and the occasional friendly disagreement. The sound of our voices on the porch under the yellow glow of the overhead light was a comfortable, human music. I listened more than I spoke, content to be surrounded by the warmth of genuine companionship. These women saw me as Nora, a reader, a gardener, a friend. They asked for my opinion on the protagonist's choices, not my financial plans. They complimented the cake, not as a performance, but as a simple pleasure. This was my community, chosen and sustained. As the discussion wound down, the conversation turned personal, as it often did. Grace mentioned her grandson's first soccer game. Sarah complained about a home repair. Miriam refilled her iced tea and leaned back. "So, Nora," she said, her eyes keen behind her glasses, "you've been quiet, and you look lighter. Did you finally get rid of that troublesome tenant in your duplex? You mentioned that was a headache." The other women looked at me with polite interest. They knew only vague outlines. "I did," I said, taking a sip of my tea. "The property is sold. The matter is completely resolved." "Good for you," Sarah said firmly. "At our age, we don't need unnecessary complications." "What will you do with the proceeds?" Grace asked, not out of prying, but friendly curiosity. "A trip? I've always wanted to see the Baltic coast." "I've started a trust," I said, "for a community garden, in Robert's name. The paperwork was finalized last week." A soft, approving murmur went around the circle. Miriam nodded. He would have liked that. The man could grow anything. The simplicity of the statement, its perfect accuracy, filled me with a deep sense of rightness. This was how he should be remembered, not through conflict, but through growth. The doorbell rang, a soft chime inside the house. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, setting my glass down. I walked through the living room to the front door. A uniformed deliveryman stood on the step, holding a small, flat envelope. "Special delivery for Eleanor Jefferson. Sign here, please." I signed the electronic pad. He handed me the envelope and left. I closed the door and stood in the foyer. The envelope was standard white, my name and address typed neatly. The return address was a P.O. box in the next city over. I did not recognize the box number, but I knew the handwriting on the inside label visible through the window. It was Marcus's. I felt nothing. No surge of anxiety, no curl of anger. It was just an envelope. I carried it back to the porch. "Everything all right?" Miriam asked, noting the envelope in my hand. "A delivery," I said. I placed it on the small table beside my chair, next to the empty cake plate. I did not open it. I sat back down and picked up my iced tea. The women glanced at the envelope, then back at me. They were too polite to ask. The conversation resumed, flowing into plans for our next meeting, a recommendation for a new mystery series. The envelope sat there, a silent, neutral object. I looked at it occasionally. I knew what it likely contained. An explanation, perhaps. A justification. Maybe an apology. Or more anger. The specific content was irrelevant. Its arrival was the final punctuation mark on a concluded chapter. Opening it would be an act of revisiting, of engaging. I had no interest in that. The evening deepened. Fireflies began to wink in the darkening yard. The cicadas started their rhythmic song. One by one, the women gathered their things, thanking me for hosting. We made plans for next month. I walked them to the door, exchanging hugs and good nights. Soon I was alone on the porch again. The empty glasses and plates sat on the tray. The envelope remained on the table. The night was calm and full of the sounds of life. I stood and began to clear the dishes. I took them to the kitchen, washed and dried them, and put them away. I wiped the table on the porch. The ordinary chores were a meditation. Finally, I returned to the porch. I picked up the envelope. I held it for a moment, feeling its light weight. Then I carried it into my study. I opened the top drawer of my desk, the one where I kept old tax returns and warranty documents. I placed the envelope inside, unopened. I closed the drawer. It could wait. It could wait forever, for all I cared. My attention belonged to the living, to the present. I walked back through the quiet house and out to the porch. I stood at the railing looking at my dark garden, the shapes of the roses just visible. The air was cool now. I could hear the distant laughter of neighbors on their own porch. I reached over and switched on the porch light. The bright, warm glow flooded the wooden boards, spilled out onto the front steps, and pushed back the night. It was a beacon, not of waiting, but of welcome. A signal that this house was occupied, alive, and at peace. I left the light on and went inside. I locked the front door. The day was over. A new one would begin tomorrow with its own simple tasks and quiet satisfactions. I had reclaimed it all, not with fury, but with patience, not with chaos, but with order. And now, finally, I had peace.